Welcome back to Documentary First, an inside look at a documentary filmmaker's journey. I'm your host, Jason Rugg, and joined, as always, by our documentary filmmaker, Christian Taylor.
Hey, Jason.
Good to have you here, Christian.
Thank you.
Do you want to give a quick intro to our guest real quick?
I am so thrilled to have this guest today. We got Joe Amodei back. Joe, great to see you.
How you doing?
Good. You've been gallivanting around the world, looking at films and trying to sell and buy them. So we're super happy to have this time with you. Feel very honored. Jason, you want to read his bio real quick for anybody who doesn't know who he is? I mean, goodness gracious.
I feel like Joe is pretty well known to Documentary First listeners. But for those who don't know Joe, he founded Virtual Films Entertainment and has been in the business since 2003. He has released films like Super Size Me, I Am Chris Farley, Restrepo, Glenn Campbell, I'll Be Me, Forks Over Knives, We Are Columbine, and I Am Patrick Swayze.
That's a lot of good stuff right there. And
that's some pretty good stuff.
As Jason was reading that, we're at an anniversary. It's like a 20th anniversary for you in this business.
October. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
20 years with this. Yeah. It's strange.
Yeah, and I bet you have seen so much transformation, and we've talked a little bit about that, before. But I think the transformation in the last 5 to 10 years probably has been like lightning speed. Why don't you talk about, we've got a few things to talk about today. We're going to entitle this episode, Top 5 Things Every Filmmaker Should Know. So we've got 5 things that you are going to talk to us about.
Yep.
And, but before we start that, I do want to talk about what you've experienced over this course of your career, and then what you've been learning recently as you've gone to other film markets, as you've done business in the industry. Tell us what's happening out there right now. So for starters, the main question is, you've been in this business for 20 years. You've seen a change. Tell us what you've been seeing. So
the question really should be, tell us what has happened in the last 5 minutes or 5 days or 5 weeks there, because we're seeing such a change, such an upheaval in the entire film industry, from the studio level all the way down to, independent filmmakers and independent film distributors. And I'll get into that in a second. But, when I got into the business, I actually got into the business a lot longer than 20 years ago. I worked at the very first video store in Philadelphia, renting VHS tapes. So,
wow.
Yeah. So I have witnessed the change from VHS to DVD, or really VHS to Laserdisc, and then DVD, and then Blu-ray, and then I guess streaming, and then originals, and then transactional. So I've been around through all of these changes, and being I'm a historian, a film historian, so I have a lot of knowledge about the film business, and all the way back to the silent days. And I've studied the change from silent to sound and how that changed the industry. And then when television hit, which changed the industry again. And then the closure of movie theaters that were owned by movie studios up until the early 50s, 90% of every movie theater that Americans went to was owned by a studio. And then the United States government said, it's a little bit of a monopoly there. You cannot own theaters anymore. So that and the advent of television really put it ended the studio system that we all, are fond of, or that created some of the greatest movies in film history. So there has always been changes and upheaval and format changes to the industry that we all work in, but nothing like the last 2 years. We had streaming come on board 5 years ago, which killed the video store business, the video retail business, put it out of business very, very quickly, because everybody can now just order a movie from their television set or their computer and didn't need to go into, a retail establishment, even though the retail establishments, that business was working pretty darn well. People had enjoyed it.
Yeah. And I remember vividly, that period of time where everybody was loving going to Blockbuster And it was just, it was a really, really fun time. And there was magic baked into waiting for that video to come back or going in and buying the popcorn. There was a smell, there was a feel about all of that. And then I do remember when Netflix kind of came along and they started with, I think, the DVDs in boxes that they were sending by mail, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, wait a minute.
Oh, wow.
You still get them.
You still get them?
Oh, yeah. Because the movies come out. Oh, yeah. You can still get DVDs through Netflix. Now, everybody's watching this saying, what is wrong with him? One, he still has a DVD player. But the little known secret is that, again, going back to my love of film and my need to see just about every movie that comes out, and I've been that way since a child, movies come out on DVD before they get to streaming by a good 2 to 3 months. So even now. Oh, yeah. A lot less now because a lot of people aren't even releasing their movies on DVD. But there's a lot of films that, I want to see the minute that they come out. I don't want to wait 3 months for streaming. So I've always kept my DVD account at Netflix. But I will tell you, at one time, my DVD queue was close to 200 titles.
When do you have time to watch all of these?
Yeah, ask my wife. And today that queue is less than 10.
Wow.
Less than 10.
Wow.
So, yeah. Wow. But, I listen, I watch a movie a day, almost, sometimes 2 in a day. It's what I've done since as long as I can remember. It's my constant companion that there's always something to see. Yeah. So being able to watch all of these changes within the industry and being a part of it and adapting my own business to it, has been very, very exciting. It's been very challenging, in particular the last couple of years, but it's been really exciting to see, VHS. So VHS, when those video stores that you were talking about, when the business first started, when the video business first started, one movie cost the retailer around $60 because the business was nothing but a rental business. Nobody owned movies. So that business thrived for 2 or 3 years. You would go to the video store and you would rent a movie, or you would rent 2 or 3 for $5 or $3. And you do the math, you break even on that $60 pretty quick. And then Paramount came out and said, you know what, we're going to do a test and we're going to put Raiders of the Lost Ark out to the marketplace for $19.99 because we think people will want to own Raiders of the Lost Ark. And they were right. And
so wait a second. Wait. Because I don't really remember this. So you're saying that there was a time when we only could rent the movies, we couldn't own them.
Oh, no, you could buy them, but they were $79.
Oh, they were super expensive.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so the test with Raiders was $20, $19.99.
Raiders was $20, and everything changed. Everything. Wow. Now any of the big Raiders-ish movies, the hit movies, were $19.99 or $24.99. They were affordable to the consumer, and that's when the Walmarts of the world and the Best Buys of the world, the major brick and mortar retailers, got into the business. They weren't in the business. There was no big brick and mortar stores carrying videos before that.
Well, and from the consumer's point of view, as I recall, it was really cool to have these movies. And I'm sort of dating myself, but when my husband and I met, I can't believe I'm telling this story. When my husband and I met, we met on a basketball court in Washington, D.C., and he asked me to go out for a drink. And I said, no, my number's in the phone book, trying to, see if he was really going to pursue me. He did. And we went out to get a drink at the Tombs in Washington and then decided we were going to watch a movie back at my place. And go. So he, this was like 1993. And I went home and he showed up with a gym bag And I was like, who does he think he is? Like, I thought he was thinking he was going to spend the night. And he comes in and he opens his gym bag, and he's got a whole bunch of DVDs in there for me to choose from. And so I chose Hunt for Red October because it was relatively new, and he had the VHS tape of it. Did I say DVDs? Right. These were VHS tapes. He had a gym bag full of VHS tapes. And so I picked Hunt for Red October, and we watched that on my VCR.
There you go.
But we were proud to own these VHS tapes. You know, they were in your bookcases, and
yes,
you were kind of cool if you actually had movies in your own house.
And then when Disney started releasing their classics,
right,
at $24.99 or $29.99, every family had Bambi and Pinocchio and Snow White. They just waited for them to come out.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so what was the next big change then?
So the next big change was actually streaming. I mean, that business ran successfully forever. And here's a little story. So Blockbuster has, 27,000 stores, and I think they actually owned between 15 and 20,000, and the rest were franchises. Everything's going well. You know, I didn't own a company back then. Otherwise, I'd be in a little bit different financial situation. But I was working for people at that point. So Netflix starts, and they're mailing these DVDs to everybody's homes. So, Blockbuster is like, well, nobody ever is going to take part in that. They want to come into our stores. That's the first mistake Blockbuster made. So it took Blockbuster about a year to figure out, well, maybe we should start mailing, have home delivery too. So then Blockbuster started.
But it was too late, wasn't it, for them?
It was too late. And then but Netflix is still, I don't want to say they're small potatoes, but, they're a small company where Blockbuster is the leader. So Blockbuster says, hey, Netflix, we want to buy you. And without naming names, but the principals of Netflix fly to Dallas, Texas, which is where the headquarters of Blockbuster was. And they go into this meeting, and Blockbuster, again, not naming any names, the legend of this story says that Blockbuster treated Netflix, the people at Netflix, like they were, the little kids in the room, and that they made an offer that was absolutely insulting to the Netflix people, and treated them as if, you're never going to take over. We're Blockbuster. It was really a bad meeting. And I know people that were in that meeting that have told me this story. And Netflix left the building, and as they were, walking across the street to the parking lot, these two men who were, at the top of the stairs at Netflix looked at each other and said, we're going to take them down. That they treated like this. And they did.
Wow.
And they did.
And they did. Super. I mean, and it didn't even seem to take that long. Like,
it didn't take that long.
Before we knew it, like, Blockbuster was just, I don't know, gone.
Gone. I mean, it seemed like it happened overnight. It probably happened over a year, but gone. I mean, every video store in the country closed.
And is that just because we were renting movies from Netflix through the mail? That's what did it?
No. At the same time, within that next year, streaming started. You were able, so that was the killer. You didn't need to go, because at that point, everybody's selling their movies to Netflix. I think Disney was the only one that wasn't. But everybody's putting their movies up on Netflix. There wasn't Apple and Amazon Prime and Hulu. They didn't exist at this point. It was only Netflix. So you wanted to see a movie, you went to Netflix.
Yeah, and I remember there was this weird time where Netflix decided they were going to do streaming, and everybody was like, they're crazy. That's not going to work. And
I said that.
Yeah.
To Ted Sarandon.
I said that. Wow, you were wrong.
Oh, I was so wrong. I was, we were the second company to give Netflix movies for streaming. And I think I said this on one of the other podcasts, so forgive me if I did, but I got a phone call and Netflix said, we need 100 movies. I said, for what? And they said, this thing's streaming. And they made me an offer. It was a really good offer. I said, "What's streaming?" And they said to me, people will be able to watch movies on their computer. And I said, "Listen, I'll sell you the 100 movies, but you're out of your mind. Never will this happen." Yeah, so that's the guy you got as your guest on the podcast right now.
Well, I mean, it's just so hard to see because there was just so much we didn't know.
There was so much we didn't know.
But I feel like that streaming thing did take a long time to take hold because it took the younger generation who understood streaming to kind of get older, and the people that were buying actually hard things or renting hard things. It's still difficult to make them transition.
As soon as people adopted watching movies on their phone, which was unheard of at that time,
right?
And that's the younger generation, then everything was off the table.
Then a pandemic hits and nobody can really do anything, and streaming is so accessible. And now we're in the last 3 years.
Yeah. So over the last let's say half a dozen years, streaming is king, and everybody across the board are paying exorbitant amount of money to make movies because they started making their own movies. So you started hearing $300 million budgets, $400 million budgets, the average film, $200 million budgets. And, those films are not being shown theatrically. They are going on to the streamer, whether it be Netflix or Apple. They aren't on iTunes. Those films never get rented. And because it's all about subscribers, you want to put the new Brad Pitt movie or, on your service. So people say, I need to subscribe. And it's great, again, for a couple years, but sooner or later, you're going to plateau on members, and that starts to happen 3 years ago, and it's noticeable. But by now, everybody's making their own movies. There's very, very little licensing of films going on.
Meaning the streaming companies are making their own movies,
and the premium cable folks, the HBOs, the Showtimes, they're all making their own stuff. And then the pandemic hits. And what the pandemic does is it helps out the renters, the transactional people that are renting movies. Because it doesn't really help the subscribers because they've already paid for their subscription. They've already subscribed. It wasn't like the pandemic hit and, another 100 million people subscribed to Netflix. They already were subscribers to Netflix. So it really helps out the transactional business. And the streamers haven't figured out, these high budget movies. They haven't gotten past figuring that out yet. And then the pandemic ends and people go back outside. The transactional business goes back down to where it was. And now the subscriptions are really off the charts. They're not happening at all. And every single one of them realizes they're over their head. So what do you do when you're over your head? What do you do when you're, not making as much money as you did the previous year?
Like people go, stop making, original things. But I want to go back for a second because during the pandemic, a lot of people had Netflix. Some people had Amazon Prime, and maybe some people had Disney, but it seemed like all of a sudden everybody decided to get into the streaming game. And so before I knew it, if I wanted to see X, Y, and Z, I had to have 5 different subscriptions, to different streaming services. And then it becomes untenable for the people wanting to watch movies. So then they have to figure out, well, which streaming service do we want, and start cutting things. I mean, I still feel like we're in this weird place of the industry has no idea what's going to happen because I think the economic situation has really changed things. So it was like we're in this perfect storm of confusion, economics-wise and business-wise.
Yeah, we are. And that would be the end point of where we're at today. Over the past 3 weeks, so let's talk about the past 3 weeks. Disney lays off, is in the process of laying off 7,000 people, and that touches into the acquisitions department. Discovery and Warner are still trying to figure out how that's all going to work, and layoffs continue to happen. And Netflix lets go of two of their key people that were instrumental in building the streaming business, both on the documentary side and the narrative side. And everybody sits back and says, what the heck is happening? Because you're right, Christian, nobody knows. And when we get to a point like this, everybody's afraid to buy. Everybody's afraid to spend money on independent product. They're still going to buy their Brad Pitt movie. They're still going to make the, whatever, even the Will Smith movie, in spite of all that, in spite of everything Will has brought on himself. So the big stuff is still going to be made, and that's what they're going to talk about. But the smaller stuff, the independent stuff, is hurting right now. So that's why these 5 things that we talk about, or that we want to discuss, are even more important today for young filmmakers than they ever have been. And not in any order, but I know on this list is know the business that you're getting into, and that is so important right now. I don't want to say it's easy, but part of being a filmmaker is knowing how to make a film, or knowing whatever your job is, whether it be editing or sound or directing or producing or writing, whatever you're doing or whatever you're learning to become the best that you can be in that part or in that subject. But if you're producing or you're directing or you're someone that's putting it all together, knowing how to make that film is half of the is half of the job, half of the miracle. So making your film is half the miracle. You made your film, you finished your film. That's 50% of the miracle. The other 50% is getting that film, making it available for people to see. And that's the second half. And that's becoming harder and harder and harder.
And I want to throw one other thing in there, and maybe it's a thirds kind of thing. But part of knowing the business, knowing how to get your movie seen, and completing your project is all about knowing the business of business. So it's, how are you going to control your budgets? How are you going to, make sure that you can make the movie that you want to make? You don't get over your skis. You don't lose your shirt in the midst of that. And what's hard is, I'm sitting in this situation where when you don't know what the end result is, you can even find a distributor, but that distributor has to be able to do something with your film, like put it somewhere. Well, you are one of the ones that can do that, but
yeah, and that's getting your film put up on or presented to streamers or cable folks. You can find people to do that. It's not that easy, but you can find them. They're out there. There's good ones, and then there's not so good ones. And you don't just choose the first person you talk to. You ask around. You ask other filmmakers who they have used. You do your homework. But while you're making your film, and we'll stick to documentaries, while you're making your documentary, and usually it takes a couple of years to make a documentary, whatever subject matter you're talking about, you need to do the research while you're making your movie. And if it's not the director doing this, then maybe you assign somebody. But in your budget, you have to find somebody, you have to put somebody that is going to do the research of what your subject matter is, because that's that fan base is who you're going to go after when you finish your film. In your case, it was World War II. And there's, so many branches of that you can go into because you have to reach out to those people. If you're making a movie about curing cancer, then, you better be in touch with the American Cancer Society and all those other companies that help fight the cause, because they're the people that you're going to want to try to do editorials with. They're the people that you're going to try to, put your trailer up on to reach that base. And then you have to hope through your own social media methods and the distributor's social media methods that you even reach a wider wide array of people. Without that, I don't care how good the movie is. It doesn't matter. You'll get, standing ovation from your parents and your family and your best friends and think that, everybody that you love told you made a good movie, but they're not going to tell you made a bad movie, So you need to be teaching and educating yourself while you're making the movie. And again, it might not be the director's job. This might even be a new position that hasn't really been listed on, a budget before, but it's very, very important.
Well, your point is just so absolutely on point, because it's kind of where I am right now. And it ties into the way things are in our system right now. So you can, again, like I said, make a relevant movie to a fan base that is passionate, because we did in our situation. It can be well loved. It can do well in film festivals. But you have to already have that audience built in, followers built in, buyers built in that want to see your movie. And then you have to figure out, how are you going to advertise to those people? Because that's the biggest problem I see right now, is you can make a fabulous movie. You can even have an audience fan base. But if you don't have a way to get people's attention so that they know that your movie is on Amazon, Apple TV, or, Google Play or YouTube Movies, they're never going to watch it. Nobody's ever going to see it. And that piece is super challenging, even from the distributor's point of view right now. Because like you said, these streamers and cable people are not really buying independent stuff.
We used to, the business used to have every local newspaper once a week would have top 10 videos of the week. Movies would be reviewed. They're not anymore. They're,
No.
The New York Times and the LA Times and maybe Chicago reviews films. Philadelphia doesn't have a critic anymore. And we're a major city. So the discussion of movies, there is no Siskel and Ebert anymore. That ongoing discussion of new films isn't happening anymore. Because there's no press. There's no
right. Why is that?
So you have to be inventive and creative on how you get the word out. And again, if you wait until your movie's done, then you're way behind.
Yes.
Because it takes months. You need to engage those viewers almost while you're making the movie. So when that movie finally hits, they've been waiting.
Yeah. And what we found out, fortunately, I don't know how I ended up doing it, but we did do that the whole way through. And I was fortunate that we had that built-in audience. What I learned through that process is we were able to release stuff that was in the movie, and we did. And before the movie ever came out, and it kind of doesn't matter. Like in the old days, it was like a hush hush. Nobody knows what's in that movie, right?
Yeah.
You can't release anything. Everything had to be so secret. It's almost the opposite now. Like you have to tease out what you're doing and demonstrate that, and get people interested in what their appetites for free, and hoping that they will go see the whole movie. Like everything is on its head now.
Yeah, everything is on its head. And, the filmmaker has to, again, they have to educate themselves. I can't tell you how many filmmakers we talk to today, and we tell them what has been happening in the industry. Some of the things that you and I have just spoken about with layoffs and mergers, and they have no idea. And so I say to them, you're in the movie business. Don't you get Variety? Don't you get Hollywood Reporter? Don't you subscribe to Deadline.com? If you're not doing that, then don't, I almost want to say don't make a movie, because you're getting into this being so uneducated. These trades, you don't get them on your doorstep anymore unless you really want to. They still print. It's very expensive, but you get them online and you get them every single day. And that's the first thing I look at in the morning. And nowadays, we all look at it to see who's getting laid off next week, know?
Yeah. So now
you have to do that. You're asking a distributor to explain to you why Netflix is having problems right now, because the filmmaker doesn't know that their stock dropped, by almost 50% last year. People that aren't even in the industry know that Netflix ran into problems last year.
Yeah.
So
I'll tell you what I see.
Part.
What I see, and I actually see this in the acting industry as well. I see it with a lot of creatives, is that you are so focused on what you are focused on if you're focused on acting, you're focused on your craft, your skill. If you're a filmmaker, you're focused on the story you want to make, right? You're so in that creative space. And typically creatives are not necessarily business minded. That's not everyone. It's a general broad brush. But what I've learned the hard way is you really have to think about all of those things before you think about, what am I going to create? What's the art I want to make? Because ultimately the end result is, if you want to have it seen, if you actually want to make money back, you have to understand the marketplace and know what it is that people want. Otherwise, you're sunk. So I think I think you're completely right. One of the things, I'm going to go back to this list because we've kind of touched on things, but I want to put them in order. So
Sure.
The number one thing is learn the distribution business as best you can, get every trade and read them to keep up with things. So
Yes.
You were just talking about some of the trades that I heard you mention. Let's go over them again. What are the top trades you recommend people read?
So the top trades would be obviously Variety and Hollywood Reporter. As importantly, maybe even on top of Variety and Hollywood Reporter, would be Deadline.com. There's a UK-based magazine called Screen Daily. Those are the top four. You can get into Filmmaker.com. You can get into specific to your trade. I'm sure there's some editing sites that you can go to. But overall, to learn the business, even if you only do the top three, because Screen Daily's a little bit more expensive and it's more European centric, but that's very important. But if you can do Deadline, Variety, and Hollywood Reporter, you're in. You're in.
Yeah, one of the ones that I've been enjoying recently is Lucas Shaw at Bloomberg Screen Time. Have you read this at all? I mean, I really feel like he's got his pulse on kind of what's going on in the industry, and they're free emails that I get.
Yeah, and there's one called The Wrap that's really good. It's funny, as we've seen the business change, the old standbys, Variety and Hollywood Reporter, they were starting to get scooped by Deadline. Now Deadline's starting to get scooped by The Wrap. And so there is this new breed starting to hit, and the old timers at Hollywood Reporter and Variety are trying to catch up sometimes. So, my suggestion is to get as many as you can afford.
Yeah, I also get Real Screen. I don't pay, like a lot of the things I've been reading, I'm not paying for them. So, if you don't want to spend money on some of these other ones, there are resources out there. Like Real Screen is great. Like I'm getting those emails all the time, and it's talking about the layoffs. It's talking about the business of things. It is talking about who the movers and shakers are, who's getting promoted, who's not. So there are things out there that people can find. But like you said, I do think there's the top 3 or 4 that are worth paying for. And you got to put that in your budget as a business person and realize that that's not an insubstantial, commitment.
No, that's not fluff.
Yeah, business-wise. No. Okay, so then the next one is watch movies, all kinds, all the time, from all ages, learn the masters.
I mean, I try to say this as much as I can. You can learn more from a silent film, a really good silent film, than you can technique and creativity from just about any movie being made today. And I think Spielberg and Scorsese and even Tarantino would agree. Don't be afraid to watch, old movies. You will learn from them. They are going, even though they might be legendary, it might be Hitchcock, it might be Howard Hawks, it might be John Ford. They went through exactly what you're going through right now. So, John Ford went through the same, aggravation and everything else that comes with it. When it comes to making a movie, he went through that with Grapes of Wrath. I mean, Frank Capra went through it with It's a Wonderful Life. I mean, that kind of stuff never changes. The aggravation, the nervousness, the consternation, everything. They went through it too, and they came out on the other side and made a movie. So don't be afraid of the masters.
Well, and Ken Burns, I mean, I've shared this a zillion times, but
perfect example.
I was, that's the documentary world. And when I hear him talk about all of the failures that he has had and how hard it is to get financing and just the stuff that he went through, you realize if masters like that are going to go through all of that stuff, it's not because I am, a little, nothing and I don't know anything. It's just part of the business. It's part of the business. They're
all going through it. There's a very, very small percentage of them. No, I shouldn't even say this. I'm sure George Clooney has had projects that were passed on.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah. And that's what Ken Burns said. And I was like, what? You got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. They all go through it.
Yeah. Crazy. Okay. Let's move on to number 3. So number 3, we kind of touched on this a little bit, but I think you probably have some more things you can share. Educate yourself on film marketing and how in a no print world you can get the word out about your film, learn social media. Talk to us about what your company has had to learn, in order to market what you're doing.
So, we really handle the Facebooks and the Twitters and the Instagrams of the world. And then what we try to do in certain cases is go after that subject matter of that documentary that we were talking about and try to enlist the aid of websites or bloggers that talk about this subject matter. And again, whether it be World War II or any of the wide variety of subject matters our docs talk about. That has become harder and harder, but we do it. What we don't do, and what a lot of, again, this goes back to what was the established way of releasing a movie 2 years ago, and that would be you would go hire a film publicist. A film publicist takes your film and tries to get it reviewed. Well, your movie's not playing theatrically, so nobody's going to review it. So to get a high score on Rotten Tomatoes, you need a certain amount of reviews. And if you're direct to digital, you're probably not going to get that number of reviews. So, and publicists are expensive. They're not $1,000,
No.
A really good one's $20,000. And if you know somebody really well, maybe you can get that person down to 15. But we have found that most recently, it's just not worth it. So, again, it goes back to teaching yourself and how to do it and using those tools, whether it be Facebook or Instagram or any of these other maybe news sites that younger folks might know that I wouldn't. And it could be TikTok. I mean,
let me just share sort of a real case scenario. I've talked about, recently we've pretty much lost all of our staff. People couldn't volunteer anymore. They are now moving on to their paying work. So Ben Feithen and I are kind of left here. We have Jonathan Liu who posts stuff for us. We're so thankful for him. But for the most part, it's Ben and I. And I've had other people doing my social media. Well, now I had to make a choice. Am I just going to let this go or am I going to have to learn this myself? So I have been out there since January trying to figure out how to make an Instagram post, which probably makes everybody under, 30 laugh hysterically.
Sure.
But there are so many different ways to try to make those posts and interact. And every platform is different. Every single platform is different. Everyone has a different audience. And you have to, figure out how to put your stuff out there in a way that reaches that market. So, and you can spend money buying views and buying subscribers. And so I thought that that's really how it was going to work. And so with a couple of our posts on Instagram, I did boost those. I probably spent around $200 for 2 or 3 reels. And those reels got up to, somewhere between 10 and 19,000 views. And when I paid for people to go and visit our profile, we were able to get followers. So those are followers that we paid for, views that we paid for. And I thought, well, that's good. Maybe we've gotten 300 more subscribers and we got a lot of views. But I spent $200 to do that.
Yeah.
So then I had this meeting with the 101st Airborne Division, who has, thousands of, subscribers and viewers every day. And thankfully they said to us, well, you're focusing your next film on the 101st Airborne Division. Why don't we collaborate on some posts?
Yes.
I was like, well, awesome. So we made a post focusing on the 101st Airborne Division. They collaborated with us and shared it with a couple of their influencers that they partner with. And within a matter of 24 hours, we had like 15,000, views on one reel, including a whole bunch of subscribers. So it's now up to 20,000, 500, something like that, views.
That's great.
We've continued to get subscribers, and the majority of them, were non-followers. And so then you're sitting back and you're like, holy cow, this was far more effective than spending money to try to get views and followers. But to your point, how do you make those relationships with influencers? And it comes down, Joe, you know this better than I do, relationship. Yeah. And you have to have some synergy between your film and, an influencer in order for them to kind of sign on to your mission. And that's a tough nut to crack.
That's a very tough nut to crack, but it's not uncrackable, as you've just proved. But that's why that business, that work needs to begin while the film is being made.
Yes.
Because if you wait, like I said earlier, if you wait till the film's done, then you're way behind. You're months behind. You need to have someone, and probably that person. You have to decide: did you want them to be, more creative than technical, more technical than creative, or what you really need is somebody that can man the technical aspect of it, the creative aspect of it, but as importantly, build a relationship with somebody that's not scared to get on the phone or get online and contact people they've never met before and say, hey, we're making a movie about the 101st or whatever. I need your help. And by the way, my movie is going to pay tribute to your group. We're going to turn them into heroes.
Yep.
I just need your help.
I think it's going to be a combination of like an impact producer who knows how to create an impact with your film and build those relationships, and a social media manager who knows what they're doing, as well as some foot soldiers, younger people who are actually on their devices doing what you got to do. It's not just one person. It's a bunch of people. And you're either going to have to pay for that, or you're going to have to figure out how to bring people on your team. All right, we're going to move on to the next one. So we're on number 4. We talked a little bit about this. Determine what your objective is with your film. Is it to have people see it? Is it to make money? Is it for exposure? Determine what your objective is before you ever start and how you're going to get there. So talk a little bit about those different options. When we say, to think about the objective of your film, what should people be thinking about?
So most filmmakers, their first objective is to make enough money back to pay back their investors. And, that goes into everything else we just talked about keeping your budget where it should be and not overspending and not making it so it's going to be impossible to ever pay your investors back. There's a lot of folks out there, though, especially for first-time filmmakers, that want to make a movie and maybe have angel investors or have put their own money into it, and they want their movie to be seen, meaning their main goal is to get their movie up on Amazon or to get it up on iTunes, get it up on the transactional sites, knowing it probably won't get picked up by Netflix or a site like that or a streaming site. But they want their movie to be seen because being able to say, my movie's on Amazon to Mr. Investor to go make your next movie makes it so much easier. Even if the movie's lost money, to say that I finished the film and it's available for the whole world to see, for the whole world to rent is very important. So we've actually had filmmakers come to us and say, I just need to get my film up. It's probably not going to make any money because it's of a subject matter that, it's just not going to draw people. And we actually have service deals where filmmakers come to us and they pay us a fee, and we guarantee their movie is going to be put up on iTunes and Amazon and Vudu. We like to say it's a 99 9/10% guarantee, but we've never missed. And we've done probably, 10 to 15 of them. And again, the filmmaker comes, they pay us a fee. It's not non-recoupable fee. Some filmmakers come to us when they have a movie that they've passed along to every distributor in the world, and every distributor has passed. So now they're stuck. They've made the movie, and they don't know what to do with it. And their investors are saying, well, you can't make any money if it's not up anywhere. And we guarantee it that it will be put up.
Yeah, it's an awesome service for filmmakers. All right,
Yeah.
we're running short on time,
Yeah.
so we're going to go through these last two really quick. We've already talked about this, but when you make your film, you're opening a business. And therefore, you need to understand the basic principles of business in order to achieve your goals. And I'm going to weigh in here and say what that means is money, money, money. When you open, a film, you are opening a business. You have to have a bank account. You have to have all of the, legal paperwork. You have to have an accountant. You have to have a lawyer. I mean, there are costs involved in opening a business. And so you have to understand the return on investment. And so that does mean working backwards, thinking about how you're going to market your film or make money at the end before you start, investing it. And then, spending wisely so that you recoup your investment. I mean, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is a business. It's called the film business.
Yeah.
It's been a business since Charlie Chaplin. It's a business.
True.
And you're right. You're working backwards. You have a sum of money that is put into a bank account because the film has to have its own bank account.
Yep.
And then you draw from that money. And, while you're making your film, if there's ways of cutting line items, maybe doing it yourself, you do that. Because at the end of the day, unless you have an angel investor that's going to constantly just feed you money, and they're becoming less and less attractive these days, then, if it's $300,000 or $200,000 or $100,000, that's all you got. And at the end, and what happens is in that budget, in that $100,000 has to be something for you. Okay. Even if it's $10,000 or say it's $100,000, even if it's $5,000. Okay. And you get all of a sudden you're at $95,000 and you haven't taken a penny, then maybe you've just worked for nothing. So,
well, that's where I'm guilty. I mean, I haven't taken a penny. I've worked now for five years to do this movie, and I made that critical error. I haven't paid myself. In fact, I've continued to personally put money out there. So that's a very good point, Joe. I think my next question is, is there a budget amount that people should think about? If let's say I was going to come to you and Joe, I got this movie. I need to set my budget. I want to see if there's any meat on the bones at the end. Would you recommend a budget amount to stay within so we could make a return on the investment at the end?
Documentary, right? You're talking about documentary?
Yeah.
Okay, most of the people that are watching this podcast or listening to this podcast are not going to like what I say. I would not spend over $200,000 these days. 250 tops. Today. That could be a totally different answer the next time we do this in 3 months or 4 months. But today, because think about it, there's nowhere to sell the movie anymore. Not today. We've just listed all the accounts. You can't take it to the premium cable channels because they're not buying. You have to wait for the dust to settle. But it's a lot of grunt work. You're going to have to give a lot of yourself. But I would not, maybe 250. And again, it all depends on the subject matter. You're going to make a movie about Tiger Woods and Tiger's all for it, then it's a different story.
Right. But most documentary filmmakers are not dealing with famous people, right, and they're dealing more with causes. And I think that's what I want to get at. And I think you do have to put in your budget at the end money for marketing. You cannot leave out the marketing piece of it, and it has to be a big chunk, whether you are going to be buying ads on social media, whether you're going to be hiring a social media team to do it organically. You have to save a good chunk of money for that social media marketing, not just to make your movie. Okay, so
it is so important right now, and it's not being taught in film school. It's not. Everything has changed. I mean, the way to market a movie is, like I think you said this earlier, it's on its head. Nothing is the same. There used to be, I still get it, a film critic friend of mine, a gentleman by the name of Joe Baltic, wrote for the Philadelphia Daily News, and I became friends with him. And I remember going over his house. I was young. I was maybe in my young 20s. went over to his house one night on a Friday night, and he had the New York Times entertainment section. And the New York Times entertainment section on Friday was, 30 pages thick, and it was full-page ads of all the movies coming out. And it was the coolest thing in the world, because we both love movies. And he taught me, one, to get the New York Times on Friday and Sunday, because that's when all the film stuff is. And he taught me a whole lot more. Unfortunately, Joe passed away last year, but that doesn't exist anymore. You go to the New York Times now on a Friday, you'll see some ads, Netflix ads.
Well, that's a good lesson. Joe, we've got to wrap up now, but I don't want to leave without doing DocuView Deja Vu. So now it is now time for our segment, DocuView Deja Vu. All right, Joe, did you bring a documentary to share?
Fire of Love. It's a National Geographic doc, and it's heartbreaking about this man and wife who followed volcanoes. There's no secret. They follow one too close. But it's mesmerizing. It's the filmmaking and the shots that this husband and wife took as close to a volcano as anyone's ever gotten. And yes, it's heartbreaking, and it really is. But I thought it was incredible.
And it was nominated for an Academy Award.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I do want to see that one. Okay, mine is called Senior, and it is a new documentary by Robert Downey Jr. about his dad, and it is fascinating. It is all in black and white. The method that they used to shoot it, I thought, was fascinating. His father is in the process of aging and dying, and it's just interesting how they treated him with dignity and respect. They kind of let him make his own version of the movie they were making. I loved it. I thought it was genius, incredibly tender, and just me with my father aging and dealing with a lot of those aging issues. It was just heartwarming as well. So there you go. Jason, I'm not even going to make you make a DocuView Deja Vu suggestion today.
Well, all right. Yeah, we're right down to the wire on our time here, so I'm just going to wrap up. Joe, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
I always look forward to having you here, Joe. I just love your stories so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening to Documentary First, where we believe everyone has a story to tell, and you could be the one to tell it.
Yes, you can. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.